Sooner or later, this kind of thing was bound to happen.
Trainspotting52 episode 7. Welcome back everyone. I feel really bad about the previous episode because I really had no idea what I was talking about. I was essentially rambling because it was about halfway into Sunday and I had no idea what I was going to do for that week, nor the time to do it. Similarly, I'm halfway into Sunday right now, but I do have a better idea of what I'm going to talk about, and I think this is where things are going to get a little bit more experimental, as I have to come up with ideas for how to talk about this film for another 40 weeks or so. Jesus Christ. Anyway, so I have ideas. I now have a notebook full of Trainspotting related ideas, and by full of I mean two of. But this one I actually wanted to talk about the nightclub scene and a few of the things within it that I find interesting. Like, this is off the cuff. I've thought about it a little bit, but really there's no script here, so this is becoming a little bit more into podcast territory. You might notice the screen is frozen and there's this play button and all that. I'm going to use this format to be able to scrub through a particular scene so I could, go through and get the whole scene there. I have cut out any nudity because some of it does show up. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is actually, if I could find it, is this shot right here that I never noticed before, but right behind Renton is a mural or a painting of Travis Bickle from Taxi Driver, the Martin Scorsese film. And I really just never noticed this before, and you'll see why it stood out to me in a moment, because there's something else that I didn't notice. But I just wanted to say, I do think it's interesting that Renton is placed in front of Travis, because if you've seen Taxi Driver, you know Travis Bickle is kind of an outlier. He's on the edge of, life and death, and he's this troubled person, and he has these violent and chaotic ups and downs. So there's an interesting parallel in that regard. And I'll come back to this in a second, because I think I'm just going to go through the scene linearly, but I'll come back to that. So what was the other thing here? Again, another allusion to a very popular seminal film, A Clockwork Orange. I mean, if it's not obvious to you, then Danny Boyle himself has said as much in the commentary for the film, which I did listen to when I watched it this week. So he said it very specifically was to emulate the milk bar scene from Clockwork Orange with the extremely wide angle lens, although he says it's a 10mm lens, which, if you know camera terminology, that's an extremely, extremely wide lens, especially on photography cameras, but even just on 35mm, or rather probably Super 35, which is closer to 16mm and blah blah blah. If you know the terminology, you'll get what I mean. Essentially, very wide lens, but it's very proportional, very clean. Danny Boyle explains it much better in the commentary, but that was the purpose here, was to emulate a little bit of Stanley Kubrick's Clockwork Orange. So here's the other thing. There you go. It's Iris from Taxi Driver. And the reason I wanted to bring this up is because this scene goes from Renton kind of eyeing, playing the field, to meeting Diane, which is sort of the basis of this particular episode. I thought it was interesting that this is also here, and I don't know if this was part of the nightclub, but I imagine they rented a nightclub to film. I don't think this is a studio, even though the film did use a lot of studio setups. But it's interesting to include Iris, because if you know Taxi Driver, she's underage, and Diane in this film is underage. So it's a little bit of foreshadowing, a little bit of kind of theme matching with Diane and Iris, especially back with Renton and the poster on the wall, or the painting. Again, there's a kind of parallel there, so I thought that was curious and interesting. So something I love about Diane, and I think she is definitely my favourite character in the whole film, easily. The way she's written, the way that Kelly MacDonald portrays her, it's all just really wonderful, brilliant stuff. And the story of her casting is also quite interesting, because she responded to a casting call I think she was maybe 18 or 19 years old. She went to the casting, and Danny Boyle says immediately, as soon as she came in, he knew she was the one, and she'd never acted before. And since she's in No Country for Old Men and so many other fantastic films wherein she is fantastic, but she has no formal acting training whatsoever. But this was kind of where she was discovered by Danny Boyle. And it's interesting, if you look at Danny Boyle's filmography, you'll notice a lot of actors got their start through his films or became popular after his films, even if they were established actors before. So what I love about this scene is it immediately sets up the type of character that Diane is. So this man comes up with a drink for her and a drink for him, and she drinks both and kind of leaves him. And that's where Renton, he says as much himself, but it's pure desire. It's like he kind of lusts after her at this point. He realises she's the one, so to speak. But then they leave, and again, this volcano club is actually in Glasgow, but they're in Edinburgh or Leith or whatever it's set in. But volcano, again, an interesting, I don't know if it's intentional, but it's an interesting thing to look at. The volcano sort of has a parallel with the sexual tension and the sort of building of this relationship, and how explosive it could potentially be given the circumstances with Diane. Again, just an interesting little thing to pick up on. And this moment here is possibly my favourite moment in the film and favourite line of dialogue. So I'm actually going to stop and just let this play so you can see. It's when Diane, she's picking apart Renton, and in the middle of it manages to call for a taxi and continue just destroying Renton's. It's a lovely scene.
Well, I'll come back with you if you like, but I'm no promising anything,
Do you find that this approach usually works? Or let me guess, you've never tried it before? In fact, you don't normally approach girls, am I right? The truth is that you're a quiet, sensitive type, but if I'm prepared to take a chance, I might just get to know the inner you. Witty, adventurous, passionate, loving, loyal. Taxi! A little bit crazy, a little bit bad, but hey, don't us girls just love that?
Hey?
Well, what's wrong, boy? Can't got your tongue.
So the characterization of Diane is interesting to me because at once she's portrayed as this strong, independent, well-spoken, well-thought kind of young woman, but also at the same time, like the painting of Iris, there's a lot of kind of foreshadowing and hinting that she is very immature and obviously young. I mean, you could be anywhere from 14 to 18 and definitely be mature, but you're still a kid and you're still an idiot, more to the point. And I think the little parallels that Danny Boyle had fit in are really interesting in that regard. So if we go a little bit further, so this parallels one aspect of her, where Renton feels, he's flabbergasted, he's completely knocked back by Diane shutting him down, but then seconds later, she's left the taxi door open for him, so as much as she shut him down, she's completely in control of the moment, and she allows him to come back home with him. But then, when we go to her bedroom, if I can just find it here, something I spotted, and I'll try and find this without, yeah, so it's strict. I mean, technically speaking, this may not be her, but I would imagine this is a painting of her of some type. It's not exact, but it's short hair, short dark hair, all that stuff, and it's that kind of Andy Warhol style thing. What I think this so definitely represents is she's still very much self-concerned and kind of self-interested, and to have a painting of herself on the wall 8 times over just kind of speaks to that little bit of immaturity. And then one more thing is obviously the giant teddy in the room. Now, I know people my age, I know women my age who still have teddies, and that is not a weird thing, but given the circumstances, I think this is more foreshadowing that she is much younger than Renton believes her to be. But yeah, that's kind of the gist of what I was thinking for this scene. There's a lot more going on in it, and a lot more worth talking about, but those are the things that I just thought were really interesting and may not have been noticed immediately unless you've actually watched the film, and kind of, especially if you've watched the film once a week for 7 weeks at this point. But anyway, thank you for listening, and I'll see you in future episodes.